Take off your crown. Humanity is not the pinnacle of creation. We are just a thin film of organic matter that clung to this rock in the very last second of the geological clock. We occupy the last line on the last page in the book of Earth's history. And we are so narcissistic that we are sure, before us, these pages were blank. But what if this book is not about us? What if someone had already built an industrial paradise, burned all the oil, and perished in nuclear fire when our ancestors still looked like shrews? In the year 2018, an event occurred in the scientific world that went unnoticed by the general public, but made astrophysicists and geologists around the world exchange nervous glances. Gavin Schmidt, the director of the NASA Goddard Institute for Space Studies, and Adam Frank, a professor of astrophysics at the University of Rochester, published a paper with a provocative title. They called it the Silurian Hypothesis. And no, this is not a reference to the Silurian geological period. It is a tribute to the Doctor Who series, which featured a race of ancient reptiles. But there was no fiction in the scientific paper itself. There was dry, brutal mathematics and geology. The scientists asked one simple but terrifying question. If an advanced industrial civilization existed on Earth millions of years before us, would we be able to find its traces today? We are sure the answer is yes. After all, we leave behind so much trash, concrete, and plastic. We have dug up the entire planet. How could one not notice this? But Schmidt and Frank, using data on how the geological record works, came to a conclusion that makes one uneasy. The answer is, most likely, no. We would find nothing. We would walk on the bones of ancient cities, drink water purified by filters made from their dust, and we wouldn't even suspect it. Today, we are embarking on the deepest journey through time imaginable. We won't just look into the past. We will try to find ghosts in the geological time machine. We will figure out why everything we build today is doomed to complete disappearance. We will learn exactly how the planet erases history. And most importantly, we will try to find clues. Those tiny, barely noticeable anomalies in layers of rock that might hint that someone was already starting internal combustion engines millions of years ago. Get ready. This is not a story about aliens from other planets. This is a story about aliens who might have been us long before us. It all started with the Fermi paradox. You've probably heard of it. If the universe is infinite and full of stars, then where are all the aliens? Why don't we see them? Adam Frank came to Gavin Schmidt to discuss the climate of other planets. They wanted to understand how to search for traces of civilizations in deep space, how to detect industrial pollution in the atmosphere of an exoplanet 100 light-years away. But at some point, Schmidt stopped his colleague and asked a question that turned everything upside down. He asked, "Adam, how do you know that we are the only civilization that has existed on our own planet?" It was like a bomb going off. We are used to looking for intelligence in space, but we have never truly checked the ground beneath our feet for a deep history of intelligence. Of course, we have archaeology. We find dinosaur bones that are 60 million years old. We find trilobites that are 300 million years old. It seems that we know everything. But let's be honest. What is archaeology? It is a science that digs a few meters deep, sometimes tens of meters. It finds cities that are thousands of years old. Jericho, Uruk, Mohenjo-Daro. This is antiquity to us. But for planet Earth, 5,000 years is not even a moment. It is less than the blink of an eye. The problem Schmidt and Frank faced lies in the scale of time. Geological time is a ruthless eraser. It wipes out everything. Imagine a modern metropolis, New York, Tokyo, or Moscow. Millions of tons of concrete, glass, steel, and plastic. It seems eternal. It seems to us that these monuments will stand for centuries. But let's look at what will happen to our city if humans disappear tomorrow. In the very first years without maintenance, water will begin its destructive work. It will penetrate cracks in the concrete. In winter, it will freeze and expand, tearing foundations apart. Metal frames will begin to rust. Without painting and protection, bridges will collapse in a couple of hundred years. The glass in skyscrapers will blow out and shatter. In 1,000 years, only forest-covered hills will remain of our cities, hiding pieces of rebar and concrete dust inside. And now, let's fast forward 10,000 years. Concrete will turn to dust. Iron will oxidize and return to the ground as rusty spots of ore. Plastic. Yes, plastic is durable, but even it, under the influence of ultraviolet light and bacteria, will break down into microparticles and mix with the sediment. And now, let's fast forward 1,000,000 years. 10 million. 50 million. During this time, entire continents shift. Mountains rise and are ground down by the wind into sand. Oceans change their shores. Everything that was once the surface we lived on goes down. It is buried under kilometers of new sediment. It is compressed by colossal pressure. It is heated by the Earth's internal heat. The subduction process pulls the ocean floor under the continents, melting the crust into magma. Our civilization, with all its achievements, libraries, and data servers, is just a thin layer of dirt for Earth's geological machine. A layer a few centimeters thick, sandwiched between layers of limestone and shale. This is exactly where the main problem of the Silurian hypothesis lies. Direct evidence, artifacts, mechanisms, buildings. All of this does not survive on the scale of tens of millions of years. The chance of finding a fossilized iPhone from the Jurassic period is zero. Not because it didn't exist, but because plastic and silicon are not preserved in that form. Even bones. We think the fossil record is complete, but this is an illusion. Think about dinosaurs. They ruled the planet for 150 million years. There were billions of them. Billions of creatures living, dying, fighting, and breeding. And how many complete dinosaur skeletons have we found in the entire history of paleontology? A few thousand. Out of billions of individuals who lived over millions of years, only pitiful crumbs have reached us. Fossilization is incredibly rare luck. An animal must die in the right place, fall into the silt, be quickly covered with sand, without access to oxygen. The chance of getting into the geological record is winning the lottery. And now imagine that a civilization existed not for 100 million years, like dinosaurs, but only for 100,000 years, like us. 100,000 years of an industrial era on the scale of Earth is an event that lasts a fraction of a second. The probability that we will find their bones or their tools tends toward absolute statistical impossibility. We are looking for a needle in a haystack the size of a planet. And this haystack has burned, drowned, been digested in the bowels of the Earth, and grown again hundreds of times. Schmidt and Frank realized looking for direct clues is useless. You cannot find a city that is 50 million years old. We need to look for indirect clues. We need to look for traces of how civilization changed the chemistry of the planet itself. After all, what does any industrial culture do? It consumes energy, and it dumps waste. We change the composition of the atmosphere. We change the composition of the water. We change the distribution of isotopes. And here we come to the most interesting part. Chemical fingerprints. If someone burned coal, oil, or gas in the distant past, it should have left a mark that even time cannot erase. This mark is written in the language of carbon isotopes. In nature, There are two stable types of carbon, carbon-12 and carbon-13. Living things, plants, algae, plankton, are very picky. When they build their cells, they prefer light carbon-12. It is easier for them to assimilate. Therefore, the entire biomass of the planet, all forests, all animals, and therefore all the fossil fuel that came from them, oil, coal, natural gas, all of this is enriched with light carbon-12. When we burn this fuel, we throw this light carbon back into the atmosphere. We change the balance. We dilute atmospheric carbon with this light fraction. Geologists call this the Suez effect. And this skew in the ratio of isotopes is recorded. It is recorded in the shells of sea creatures that build their houses from calcium carbonate, absorbing carbon from the water. When these creatures die, they fall to the bottom and become limestone. This limestone is a hard drive on which the chemical composition of the past atmosphere is recorded. If we look at the isotope charts for the last 100 million years, will we see sharp spikes there? Moments when someone suddenly threw trillions of tons of light carbon into the sky? The answer might shock you. Yes, we see such spikes, and they look frighteningly similar to what we are doing right now. One of the most mysterious events in Earth's history occurred 56 million years ago. Geologists call it the Paleocene-Eocene thermal maximum, or PETM for short. It was a moment when the planet seemed to go crazy. In a geologically negligible time, just a few thousand years, the temperature on Earth jumped by 5 to 8 degrees. The ice at the poles melted completely. The sea level changed. Ecosystems were overturned. But most importantly, the carbon. Analysis of rocks from that time shows a gigantic, sharp release of the light isotope carbon-12 into the atmosphere. This is exactly what our humanity will leave behind. If alien geologists flew to Earth 50 million years after us and took samples of rocks from our era, they would see exactly the same peak. Rapid warming, carbon release, species extinction, ocean acidification. The Paleocene-Eocene maximum lasted about 100,000 or 200,000 years. This is very close to the time our civilization might exist if we don't destroy ourselves sooner. Coincidence? Scientists say, most likely, yes. The official version states that natural factors were the cause of that ancient warming. Perhaps massive volcanic eruptions in the North Atlantic ignited deposits of coal and peat. Or maybe the melting of gigantic reserves of methane hydrates on the ocean floor. Methane is a powerful greenhouse gas, and its release could have triggered a chain reaction. But here is the catch. Natural processes usually work slowly. Volcanoes can spew carbon for millions of years. Methane can melt gradually. The PETM event happened geologically instantaneously. On charts, it looks like a vertical wall, just like our era, which is called the Anthropocene, looks on charts. We humans burn fossil fuels 100 times faster than volcanoes do. We are a geological force acting with the speed of an explosion. And what happened 56 million years ago has amazingly similar dynamics. Could this have been the handiwork of intelligent beings? Beings who built a global civilization in the Paleocene era, when the first primates were just beginning to appear on Earth? Beings who, just like us, found an easy source of energy in the bowels of the Earth, built cities, factories, transport, and then faced the consequences? With global warming that got out of control? Or maybe with a war that burned their world? Schmidt and Frank do not claim that these were necessarily reptiles or intelligent lemurs. They only say that the data we have does not allow us to rule out such a possibility. The signal we see in the stone is identical to the signal from an industrial civilization. Distinguishing a natural disaster from a man-made disaster 50 million years later is incredibly difficult. The stone is silent about the causes. It remembers only the chemistry. But carbon is not the only clue. If there was a civilization, it must have used materials. And some of these materials do not exist in nature. They are unnatural. If we find them in rock layers that are millions of years old, it will be direct proof that someone synthesized them artificially. And the main candidate for the role of such an eternal marker is our beloved and hated plastic. We produce billions of tons of plastic. We have covered the ocean floor with it. Microplastic is in the ice of Antarctica and on the summit of Everest. Plastics are complex polymers. Yes, they break down, but they do not disappear without a trace. They turn into a molecular trail. Over time, under pressure and temperature in the bowels of the Earth, plastic can transform. But it can leave behind specific hydrocarbon chains that are not found in ordinary oil. Imagine a layer of sedimentary rocks of the future. A geologist drills a well and finds a thin, strange layer. It contains an increased content of heavy metals, lead, chromium, mercury. We use these metals in electronics and industry. In the same layer are strange isotopes not found in nature. And there too are the decay products of synthetic materials. This layer will be thin, just a few millimeters, but it will be global. It will be all over the planet. Future geologists will call it the technogenic horizon. Are there such horizons in Earth's past? We don't know, because we never purposefully looked for them. We looked for bones, we looked for shells, but we never conducted a mass spectrometric analysis of every centimeter of Mesozoic-era rock for the presence of synthetic molecules. This requires colossal resources, and most importantly, it requires a willingness to see what does not fit into the picture of the world. Another marker is nitrogen, the use of fertilizers. To feed 8 billion people, we synthesize ammonia from the air, the Haber-Bosch process. We pump a gigantic amount of nitrogen into the soil. This nitrogen is washed away by rains into rivers, and from there into the oceans. This changes the isotopic composition of nitrogen in marine sediments. This creates dead zones in the ocean, where algae bloom and everything living dies due to a lack of oxygen. And what do you think? In the geological record, we see the same events. Oceanic anoxic events. Moments when oceans suddenly became poisonous and dead. Usually, we blame volcanoes or changing currents for this. But the structure of these events, their sharpness, again leads to suspicions. What if it wasn't a volcano? What if it was runoff of fertilizers from the fields of a civilization trying to feed its overpopulation? Schmidt and Frank, in their work, offer a new approach to studying Earth. They suggest looking at it as a potentially inhabited planet in the past, not as a cradle where we are the first children, but as a dormitory where the tenants change, but the room remains the same. But there is an argument that skeptics cite most often, and it sounds weighty. If there was a civilization, then where is the nuclear waste? Where is plutonium-244? Where is curium? We humans have detonated more than 2,000 nuclear charges. We have accumulated mountains of spent fuel. Isotopes created in reactors do not exist in nature. Their half-life is tens and hundreds of thousands of years. Some, like plutonium-244, live 80 million years. If there was a nuclear war, or just developed nuclear energy 50 million years ago, we should have found traces of these isotopes. But we don't find them. There is no anomalous plutonium in PETM rocks. Does this mean the hypothesis is wrong? Not exactly. And the answer lies in what we call the efficiency paradox. The more advanced a civilization is, the fewer traces it leaves. Think about it. The early industrial era is black smoke, mountains of slag, open pits, wild dumps. It is dirty, inefficient, and noticeable. But as technology develops, it becomes cleaner. We move to closed cycles. We learn to recycle plastic. We move from burning coal to solar energy, wind, and possibly fusion. A solar panel leaves far fewer traces in geology than a coal power plant. A fusion reactor does not leave long-lived radioactive waste, like a fission reactor. Digital information does not require the construction of giant stone libraries. Biodegradable materials disappear without a trace. A paradox arises. The longer a civilization exists, the wiser and more sustainable it is, the harder it is to find. The dirty phase of development we are in right now may be very short. 100, 200, maybe 300 years. And then either civilization dies from its own filth, or it matures and becomes invisible to future geologists. If that ancient civilization went through the dirty phase quickly, say, in 100 years, then the layer with its garbage would be so thin that it is simply impossible to notice with standard core analysis. It could be compressed to the thickness of a sheet of paper. Or it could have been completely washed away by erosion before being covered by a new layer. We can look right at the evidence and not see it. But there is another aspect that scares the most. Resources. We pump oil, coal, and metals from the most accessible veins. We skim the cream off the planet. If an advanced civilization had been here before us, shouldn't they have dug all this up before us? Why did we find full deposits? This is a strong argument, but let's look at the numbers. Coal formed in the Carboniferous period 300 million years ago. Oil formed in different eras. If a hypothetical civilization lived, say, in the Silurian period 400 million years ago, then they had neither our oil nor our coal. These resources had not yet formed. They could have used other sources. Or they could have lived in an era when oil already existed, but used only a small part of it, just as we used only a small part in the 19th century. And what about metals? Gold, iron, rare earth elements. We extract them from ore bodies. Ore bodies are formed by hydrothermal processes in the Earth's crust. This takes millions of years, but the planet is constantly renewing itself. Old deposits are destroyed by erosion. New ones are formed. Plate tectonics remelts the crust. Perhaps the deposits that they mined have long gone into the mantle, and we are mining new ones formed over the last tens of millions of years. Earth is not a warehouse that was filled once. It is a factory that runs continuously. If we assume that the Silurian hypothesis is true, then a question arises that destroys our entire anthropocentric picture of the world. Who were they? What did they look like? We are used to looking for a mirror. We are looking for humanoids. 2 arms, 2 legs, a big head. Science fiction has taught us that intelligence must wear our shape. But evolution is not a straight line leading to humans. It is a tree. And on this tree, there were many branches that could have borne the forbidden fruit of intelligence long before our ancestors came down from the trees. Let's look at those who owned this planet the longest. The dinosaurs. We are used to considering them a dead-end branch. Stupid, slow lizards that only knew how to chew leaves and growl. But this is a monstrous misconception. Dinosaurs were incredibly diverse, and among them were species whose intelligence scares paleontologists. Meet the Troodon. It is a small predator that lived in the Cretaceous period. It had large, forward-facing eyes, binocular vision like ours. It had free forelimbs with grasping fingers capable of grabbing objects. But the main thing is its brain. The ratio of brain mass to body mass in the Troodon was the highest among all dinosaurs. It was comparable to modern birds and even some mammals. If not for that fatal asteroid that fell 66 million years ago, The Troodon would have had another 50 million years of evolution in reserve. Canadian paleontologist Dale Russell conducted a thought experiment in the 80s. He extrapolated the evolution of the Troodon and created a model of a creature he called a dinosauroid. This creature looked frighteningly human-like. A large bald head, 3 fingers on a hand, upright posture. Of course, many scientists laughed at Russell. Why would a dinosaur become like a human? But the point is not the shape. The point is the potential. We know that some birds, direct descendants of dinosaurs, possess intelligence that baffles researchers. New Caledonian crows create tools. They make hooks from twigs to get larvae. They understand cause and effect relationships. They remember faces. African gray parrots can master language at the level of a 3-year-old child. And all this with a brain the size of a walnut. The brain architecture of birds and reptiles differs from ours. They do not have our cortex, the neocortex, but they have other structures that work no less effectively. Who said that to create a civilization you need a mammalian neocortex? Who said that the Industrial Revolution could not have been carried out by creatures covered in feathers or scales? We look for concrete boxes because we live in them, but a civilization that arose in a different biological niche would build differently. Perhaps their cities were woven from living trees, genetically modified to create dwellings. Biotechnology instead of metallurgy. Such a civilization would not leave rusty cars behind. It would leave strange, inexplicable leaps in plant evolution. And here, we return to the geological record again. Are there traces of strange biological events there? Yes. Earth's history is full of so-called explosions of biodiversity and mysterious extinctions. We are used to blaming everything on the climate. It got warmer, life flourished. A meteorite fell, life died. But what if some of these events were the result of agriculture? What if the sudden spread of flowering plants in the Cretaceous period, which Darwin called an abominable mystery because he could not explain its speed, was the result of breeding? What if someone intentionally spread useful species across continents, like we spread wheat and corn? Traces of such activity are almost impossible to distinguish from natural evolution. Pollen in ice or stone cores will only tell us that the plant was there. It won't say whether the wind or the hand of an intelligent being planted it. But there are places where nature could not create what we find. Places where matter itself screams about artificial intervention. And this brings us back to the topic of out-of-place artifacts. Official science really dislikes this topic. Any self-respecting archaeologist will wince if you ask him about the London hammer or the Dorchester pot. Usually, these finds are declared hoaxes, dating errors, or a bizarre play of nature. And in 99% of cases, this is true. People love sensations. Miners can mistake a piece of pyrite for a gold chain. An iron ore concretion can look like a bolt. But the Silurian hypothesis forces us to look at this 1% of remaining cases with a new, frightening seriousness. Let's talk about the London hammer. In the year 1936, in the state of Texas, a hammer was found inside a piece of limestone. The wooden handle had petrified and turned into coal. The iron head of the hammer had grown into the stone. The geological age of the rock in which it was located is more than 100 million years. Chemical analysis of the iron showed a strange composition: 96% iron, 2.5% chlorine, and 1.5% sulfur. No impurities characteristic of modern steel. The metal did not rust. Skeptics say it is a 19th century hammer that fell into a crack, and mineral solutions quickly enveloped it. This is plausible. Stone can grow quickly. But chlorine in iron? This is a technology we do not use. And what if this is not a 19th century hammer? What if this is that microscopic chance, that lottery win, when a single object out of billions was preserved in ideal conditions? If the Silurian hypothesis is correct, then we should find such things. Very rarely. Once in 100 years. And we find them. But we throw them away because they do not fit into the paradigm. We filter facts. Thousands of items are lying in the storerooms of museums around the world, labeled as cult objects or incomprehensible formations. We look at the Antikythera mechanism, the computer of the ancient Greeks, and marvel. But it was found. And how many such mechanisms have rotted? If the Antikythera mechanism had not drowned in the sea, where the silt preserved it, we would still think that the Greeks only knew how to make pots and statues. We judge the past by the survivors of errors, but there is an artifact that cannot be written off as a miner's mistake or a fake. This is the weightiest argument in favor of the fact that we do not understand the history of the Earth. It is the natural nuclear reactor in Oklo. In the year 1972, French physicists analyzing uranium ore from a deposit in Gabon, in Africa, discovered something impossible. The ore lacked uranium-235. Uranium-235 is the very isotope needed for a nuclear bomb and nuclear power plants. Throughout the solar system, the ratio of uranium isotopes is the same. In meteorites, in lunar soil, in Earth rocks. But in Oklo, there was less of it. Where did it go? The only explanation is that it burned out. It participated in a chain nuclear reaction. Someone, or something, split this uranium. Scientists conducted an investigation and concluded that 2 billion years ago, 2 billion years, a nuclear reactor started working in this place. It worked stably for hundreds of thousands of years. It produced a power of about 100 kilowatts. It did not explode. It regulated itself. The official explanation states that this is a phenomenal coincidence of natural factors. Groundwater seeped into the uranium-rich rock, worked as a neutron moderator, and started the reaction. The water boiled away. The reaction stopped. The water cooled down and returned. The reaction started again. An ideal, pulsating cycle. Nature is a genius engineer. It is possible. But let's apply Occam's razor. What is easier to imagine? A chain of a dozen incredible geological coincidences that created an exact copy of a complex engineering structure, including a cooling system and waste disposal. Or that 2 billion years ago, someone simply built a reactor. The isotopic traces of Oklo, xenon, ruthenium, neodymium are exactly the signatures that Schmidt and Frank spoke about. This is the very chemical trace that a civilization should leave. We found it, but we called it a miracle of nature, because the alternative, to admit that 2 billion years ago someone in Africa was extracting energy, is too scary. If it was a civilization, then it was non-human. 2 billion years ago, only bacteria lived on Earth. Or do we think so? Maybe we underestimate the speed of evolution. The Cambrian explosion, when all types of animals suddenly appeared, happened 540 million years ago. Before that, 1.5 billion years of boring slime. But why? Why did evolution wait so long? What if it didn't wait? What if complex ecosystems arose and perished many times, but their traces were completely erased by the movement of continents? The ocean floor renews every 200 million years. Everything that was at the bottom 2 billion years ago is now melted in the mantle. Oklo was preserved only because it is located on an ancient, stable continental plate, a craton. It is an island that survived the storm. The Silurian hypothesis forces us to rethink the very concept of progress. We think that progress is a ladder leading up, from a stone axe to an iPhone. But what if progress is a cycle? A civilization arises, quickly burns up available resources, pollutes the environment, and collapses, throwing the planet back into savagery. The Earth recovers. Coal accumulates again. Oil forms from new algae. And 10 million years later, a new species picks up a stick. This explains the Fermi paradox. We don't see aliens not because they don't exist, but because technological civilizations are flashes. They burn brightly, but for a very short time. We are just another spark in a fire that has been burning for 4 billion years. Perhaps we are Earth's 5th or 6th attempt to create intelligence. And judging by what we are doing to the climate, we are following the same scenario as our predecessors. A scenario that ends with a layer of soot and plastic in a geological section. But if Earth is so good at hiding corpses, is there a place where history is kept forever? A place where there is no water, no wind, no plate tectonics? A place where a boot print will remain for millions of years? Yes, and this place hangs right over our heads. The Moon. If previous civilizations had reached at least our level of development, the level of 1969, they would have flown to the Moon. This is an inevitable step, and everything they would have left there, landers, rovers, flags, trash, all of this should still be there. The Moon is a museum. It does not erase data. Vacuum and radiation preserve materials. Of course, micrometeorites slowly grind down the surface, but this process takes billions of years. The gold foil of a landing module will lie there forever. We have mapped the Moon from orbit. We have images with a resolution of 0.5 meter. We saw the tracks of the Apollos. Did we see anything else? Officially, no. But the Moon is huge. We have studied only a small part of it with high resolution. And what about caves? Lunar lava tubes are giant caves under the surface, where entire cities protected from radiation can be built. If someone wanted to survive an apocalypse on Earth, the Moon would be the perfect bunker. Or Mars. We are looking for bacteria on Mars. But maybe we should be looking for ruins. Mars has been dead for a long time. Erosion is weak there. If there were bases, their skeletons should be sticking out of the red sand. Some enthusiasts see pyramids, faces, and statues in Mars images. Science calls this pareidolia, the brain's ability to see familiar images in random spots. Most likely, it is. But the Silurian Hypothesis gives these fantasies a scientific foundation. Searching for technogenic artifacts in the solar system is not the raving of a madman. It is a logical consequence of the fact that Earth is an unreliable keeper of information. Imagine that we find not an alien ship on the Moon, but a ship built here on Earth, but 50 million years ago, with inscriptions in a language that looks like no human language, with biological remains of creatures that are our distant relatives on the genetic tree. This would be the scariest discovery in history, because it would mean that they perished. They reached the stars, they split the atom, they went into space, and still disappeared. Why? What killed them? War? Virus? Or some great filter? A law of nature that does not allow civilizations to live long? If we find their grave on the Moon, we will know that we are next. We will look at their ruins as our mirror reflection. But let's return to Earth, into the deepest mines. We mine coal. Coal is compressed forests of the Carboniferous period. We burn this archive. In the 19th century, when coal was mined by hand, miners often told stories about strange finds. A gold thread embedded in a block of coal, an iron pot, a smooth concrete wall in a coal seam. These stories were printed in newspapers and then forgotten. We can laugh at this, but let's think about the physics of the process. A coal seam is formed from a peat bog. A peat bog is an ideal preservative. Bodies of Iron Age people are found in swamps with preserved skin and even facial expressions. If an artifact fell into a carboniferous swamp, a lost tool, a machine part, a piece of ceramics, it could have been preserved, and then the swamp petrified. Coal is a soft rock. A hard alloy artifact would have survived the pressure. When we burn coal at a power plant, we grind it into dust. We destroy evidence on an industrial scale. Perhaps right now, while you are listening to this video, proof that we are not the first is burning in the furnace of some power plant. The last fragment of plastic or a microchip of an ancient civilization turns into heat and electricity for your computer. The irony of fate. We feed our civilization with the corpses of the previous one. Schmidt and Frank in their work do not try to prove that reptilians built the pyramids. They do something more important. They show us the limits of our knowledge. They say, absence of evidence is not evidence of absence. We looked too narrowly. We looked only for what we know. We looked for human traces. But we must look for traces of intelligence. Intelligence is not the shape of the skull. Intelligence is a way of interacting with matter. It is a thermodynamic process. Intelligence organizes matter in an unnatural way. It concentrates rare elements. It creates polymers. It changes the thermal balance of the planet. And these traces, these thermodynamic scars, are much harder to hide than gold coins or stone axes. We have already talked about plastic and radiation, but there is another marker that is rarely mentioned: space. Near space. If a civilization was advanced, it must have had satellites. Many satellites. Satellites in geostationary orbit, 36,000 kilometers from Earth, do not fall. They can hang there for millions, hundreds of millions of years. They turn into dead metal, but they remain in orbit. If we look at the belt of geostationary satellites, is there anything extra there? Something we didn't launch? Now there are thousands of our devices and tons of debris there. Finding an alien dead satellite covered in the dust of centuries among them is incredibly difficult, but possible. An anomaly in the orbit, a strange radar reflection, an object that has been hanging there for too long. This could be another place for future archaeology. Archaeology in a vacuum. We are used to looking under our feet, but perhaps proof of the Silurian hypothesis flies over us every night, pretending to be space debris, or lies in a showcase of a provincial museum with a sign "Unknown Ritual Object," or is hidden in the formula of uranium isotopes from an African mine. In the last part of our investigation, we will try to put all the clues together. We will ask the main question: if they were, and if they disappeared, were they able to leave us a message? Not in stone that will crumble, not in metal that will rust, but in something more reliable, in the very code of life, in DNA. Some scientists seriously discuss the possibility that part of our DNA is not the result of evolution, but artificially encoded information. A message in a bottle, thrown into the ocean of time, inside our own cells. And we will analyze one more frightening scenario. What if they didn't disappear? What if they just left? Left to where we cannot find them? Into the depths of the ocean? Or into underground cities in the Earth's mantle? Or they moved to another form of existence? The Silurian hypothesis opens a door to a room full of mirrors, where every reflection can be the truth, or it can be an illusion. And we are just starting to look into these mirrors. Imagine a library that can repair itself. A library that will survive fire, flood, ice age, and asteroid impact. The books in this library do not burn. They multiply. This library is inside you, in every cell of your body. It is DNA. We are used to thinking of DNA as instructions for assembling an organism, but from the point of view of information theory, it is the ideal data storage medium. In 1 gram of DNA, you can record hundreds of millions of terabytes of information. And this information can be copied with incredible accuracy over billions of years. In the year 2013, scientists from Harvard recorded a book into a DNA molecule and then read it back without a single error. This proved that biotechnological data storage is possible. And now remember the Silurian Hypothesis. If an ancient civilization knew that their world was doomed, that their cities would turn to dust, and their computers would rot, how would they pass knowledge into the future? How would they send us a message? We were here. Do not repeat our mistakes. They would write it into the genome of those who would survive, into the genome of protozoa, bacteria, or even our distant ancestors. In our genome, there are huge sections that we call junk DNA, or non-coding DNA. It does not produce proteins, it just exists. It occupies 98% of our genetic code. 98%. Scientists argue about its purpose. Some say it is a graveyard of viruses that attacked us millions of years ago. Some believe it is a reserve for evolution. But there is a bold hypothesis called genomic SETI. What if there is a message encrypted in this junk? A mathematical constant? A map of the starry sky? Or the history of the fall of the Paleocene Atlantis? We are just beginning to decipher this language. We are looking for patterns, and we are finding strange things, repeating sequences that look like artificial code. So far, these are just guesses. But imagine for a second, you look into a microscope, decipher a sequence of nucleotides in a strange section of a chromosome, and you see not biology. You see text, or a formula. This would be the grandest hello across the abyss of time. A message that we carry within ourselves without even suspecting it. We ourselves are living monuments to those who came before us. But let's leave biology and return to the physics of destruction, to what awaits us. The Silurian Hypothesis is not just a detective story about the past. It is a mirror of the future. Gavin Schmidt and Adam Frank wrote their paper not to look for lizards. They wrote it to understand what will remain of us. If we disappear tomorrow, how long will Earth remember humanity? The answer is frightening. Most of our achievements will disappear instantly. Electronics, paper, wood, it is dust. Concrete structures will stand for a couple of thousand years, but geology will chew them up. But there are things we have created that will remain as scars on the body of the planet forever. And by these scars, future geologists, whether they are intelligent rats, squids, or aliens, will be able to reconstruct the picture of our existence. The first scar is extinction. We live in the era of the 6th mass extinction. We are destroying species at a speed not seen since the fall of the meteorite that killed the dinosaurs. We killed the megafauna, mammoths, woolly rhinoceroses, giant sloths. We fished out the oceans. We cut down the forests. In the geological record, this will look like a sharp, instantaneous line, a layer below which there are many bones, and they are diverse, and above, silence, poverty, and a huge number of bones of, whom do you think? Livestock, cows, pigs, and chickens, especially chickens. We raise and eat tens of billions of chickens a year. Their bones, thrown into landfills, will fossilize. Future geologists will find a strange layer all over the planet consisting of the bones of a single bird species. They will name our era not the Age of Man, but the Age of the Chicken. It sounds funny, but it is a scientific fact. The chicken is the most common dinosaur on Earth today. and it is our main geological marker. The second scar is new materials. We have already talked about plastic, but there is also aluminum. In nature, aluminum is found only in compounds. Pure metallic aluminum does not exist. We mined it, purified it, and scattered it around the planet in the form of cans, foil, and machine parts. Aluminum does not rust like iron. An oxide film protects it. Small particles of aluminum will remain in sedimentary rocks as a marker of high technology. And there is also glass and ceramics and rare crystals grown for lasers and chips, synthetic diamonds. All of this is anomalies. A geologist of the future, analyzing sand, will find grains of materials in it that could not have arisen in a volcano or at the bottom of the sea. They have a perfect crystal lattice. They are too pure. It will be sand that screams, "I was made in a factory." The third scar is chemistry. We have synthesized hundreds of thousands of substances that do not exist in nature. Forever chemicals, PFAS, Teflon, Freons. These molecules have incredibly strong bonds. They are not decomposed by bacteria. They will persist in sediments for millions of years. If a future scientist finds traces of Teflon in rock 50 million years old, he will have no doubts. Nature does not create non-stick coatings. Only industry does that. And finally, the scariest and most long-lasting scar, radiation. We have already mentioned the reactor in Oklo, but what we did is on a larger scale. Nuclear weapons tests in the 20th century covered the entire planet with a thin layer of radioactive isotopes: cesium-137, strontium-90, plutonium. This layer settled everywhere, on the ocean floor, in the ice, in the soil. Geologists call this the golden spike, a marker that perfectly accurately indicates the beginning of a new geological epoch, the Anthropocene. Even after 100 million years, when most isotopes have decayed, their decay products will remain. The ratio of elements will be disturbed. Future physicists measuring this ratio will say, in the middle of the 20th century, according to the chronology of this planet, something happened here that released the energy of the atomic nucleus. They won't know about Hiroshima or the Cold War. They won't know our names, but they will know that we knew how to split the atom. And perhaps they will decide that this is exactly what killed us. The Silurian Hypothesis brings us to the concept of the Great Filter. This is the idea that there is a certain barrier in the universe that prevents life from developing to the level of an interstellar civilization. Maybe this barrier is the origin of life. Maybe it is the origin of intelligence. Or maybe the barrier is in front of us. Maybe any industrial civilization inevitably falls into a trap. The trap is simple: easy energy, coal and oil. This is a gift from the planet that allows civilization to make a breakthrough. Build machines, multiply, change the world. But this same gift becomes poison. By burning it, civilization changes the climate. It undermines the basis of its existence. It is a race against time. Will intelligence manage to switch to clean energy sources before the ecosystem collapses? Or will it suffocate in its own smoke? If Schmidt and Frank are right, and there were others before us, it means they didn't pass the filter. They fell into the trap. They used resources, heated up the planet, remember the Paleocene-Eocene maximum, and died. And now we are climbing into the same trap. We are following in their footsteps, thinking we are pioneers. We see their graves in carbon isotope charts, but think they are just natural anomalies. This knowledge should not frighten, but sober us up. We are not the owners of Earth. We are tenants. And before us, others lived in this apartment. They made noise, littered, and were eventually evicted. Earth knows how to get rid of tenants. It is used to it. It survived asteroid impacts that boiled oceans. It survived glaciations when ice closed at the equator. It survived us, dinosaurs, trilobites. It will survive us too. Earth doesn't need us to save it. Earth will be fine. We need to save ourselves from Earth, from its reaction. The Silurian Hypothesis tells us, you are not unique in your power, and you are not unique in your vulnerability. Imagine the world 50 million years from now. The continents have shifted again. In the place of New York, there is a warm, shallow sea. In the place of the Alps, an archipelago of islands. The new dominant species has become, say, descendants of raccoons. They have nimble paws. They are social and curious. They learned to process metal. They built their first cities. And so, their geologist, digging a mine in search of rare metals, stumbles upon a strange layer, a thin black strip of compressed, unusual stone. He takes a sample. His instruments show a crazy mixture: gold, rare earth elements, glass, and complex hydrocarbons, and radiation. A weak but distinct background. He looks at this layer and scratches his head. What is this, he thinks? A volcano? A meteorite? He writes an article for the Scientific Journal of Intelligent Raccoons. He calls it the Late Quaternary Anomaly. Colleagues argue with him. They say, it is a natural process. Don't make things up. None of them can imagine that this thin layer of dirt is all that remains of a great human civilization. Of our wars, our love, our internet, our flights to the moon, of Shakespeare, Einstein, and Gagarin. Everything compressed into 1 centimeter of rock. Or maybe he will find something else? Maybe we can leave a message that will survive even this? The Memory of Mankind project is already trying to preserve knowledge in salt mines and on ceramic tablets. We send Voyagers into space with golden records, but the most reliable way to leave a mark is to change life itself. If we can terraform Mars, if we create a biosphere there, it will be a monument that Earth's erosion cannot erase. If we create artificial intelligence that can exist in space, feeding on starlight, it will be our child that outlives the parent. Perhaps those ancient civilizations did this too. Perhaps their legacy is not rusty nails, but something we see every day but do not recognize. Maybe the moon is not a natural satellite. Its size and orbit are anomalous for a planet like Earth. This is an old, fringe theory, but in the light of the Silurian Hypothesis, it takes on new colors. What if the moon is the result of ancient geoengineering? A climate stabilizer created to make Earth more habitable? Or take life itself? The genetic code of all creatures on Earth is universal. A bacterium, an oak, and a human are written in the same language. This is considered proof of a common ancestor. But what if this code was edited? Optimized? What if the Cambrian explosion was the result of the release of a patch for the biosphere? We are entering the realm of pure speculation. But that is how science works. First, a crazy question appears. Then, the search begins. The Silurian Hypothesis is exactly such a question. It removes the blinders from our eyes. It forces us to look at stone not as dead matter, but as an encrypted book with torn-out pages. And here we come to the finale, to the main conclusion. Why do we need to know this? What difference does it make if someone was before us or not? The difference is huge. If we find evidence of the existence of Silurians, we will understand that civilization is not a miracle, but a natural stage in the evolution of the biosphere. That intelligence arises inevitably when life becomes complex enough. But if we find evidence of their demise, we will receive a warning. We will see our possible future. And maybe, having this example before our eyes, we can turn off the road leading to the cliff. We can become the first civilization in Earth's history that does not burn in its own fire, but moves to the next level, becomes cosmic, becomes eternal. We stand on the shoulders of giants, but perhaps we stand on the bones of giants. And our task is not to lie down next to them in the next geological layer. Our task is to break this cycle, to break out of the wheel of samsara on a planetary scale. Look at your hands. They contain atoms that were part of stars. They contain carbon that was possibly part of a dinosaur's body, or part of the fuel of an ancient machine. We are all recycled history, but we have something they didn't have, or we hope they didn't. We have knowledge of the past. We have science that can see the invisible. The Silurian Hypothesis is a test of maturity. Are we ready to admit that we are not the center of the universe and not even the center of the history of our own home? Are we ready to learn from ghosts? Next time you pick up a beautiful pebble from the ground, look closely at it. Maybe it's not just a stone. Maybe it is a fragment of the foundation on which stood a world equal to ours. A world that loved, suffered, invented, and hoped for eternity, and which is now simply a stone in your hand. Thank you for being with us on this journey through the geological abyss. If this story made you look at familiar things in a new way, if you felt a shiver from the scale of time, like this video, it helps our signal break through the algorithms like a radio signal through cosmic noise. Subscribe to the channel so as not to miss the next investigations. We will dig deeper. We will look further. In the next video, we will discuss the dark forest theory. Why is space silent? Maybe everyone is hiding? And didn't we make a fatal mistake by sending a map with Earth's address into space? If you want to know why Stephen Hawking urged us not to answer alien signals, don't switch. And remember, the truth is out there. But sometimes it is not in the heavens, but deep beneath our feet. See you in the future, if we can build it.